Can you hold a cell phone when you're giving a share? Okay, I'll talk about an Indian. I came across it with Ashkacha practice. I looked into it a little deeper, a little bit of an interesting Indian. It's about the idea that existed. There was the idea of Bamois, of Bamutana, Bamutana. We'll talk about it, a few interesting Inyanim about it. So, the start is the Mishnah Megillah. Everyone knows we had it in last week's Parsha Bereshit. It's in Noach throughout the Torah. And before the Mishkan was built or was made, I mean, I don't know, again, whoever wanted to mark of a carbon, you felt good about something nice that happened to you. You went to your backyard, Tishrei, Gaga, whatever you wanted. You put up a few rocks and you made a carbon to the Eibush there. That was called a bama. You could build a bama in your backyard. There's also a concept of a bama g'dola, which were in some of the Mishkans that we'll talk about in a minute. So, what's the difference between a bama g'dola and a bama k'tana? So it's a Mishnah in Megillah, ein bein bama g'dola or bama k'tana. Small mizbeach you do in your backyard. There's no difference between that mizbeach, or a bama rather, and the bama, this bama g'dola that's in the Mishkans, as we'll discuss. Ela psachim, only carbon pesach. Carbon pesach you can be makriv on a bama g'dola. You cannot be makriv in your backyard. Pesach's kind of obvious because you have to go up to the Beis Hamikdash to do, if not your rachik, your richuk makim. But the Mefarshim right over there bring it down, and it's brought down at length in the Gemara in Zvachim that when the Gemara Mishnah says over psachim, Mishnah is not necessarily talking about a carbon pesach itself. The Mishnah is talking about anything that's ke'em psachim. It means a carbon that's zmanei kavua, a carbon which has a specific time. So if something nice happened to me and I want to give the Eibush a carbon, that just happened right now. I'm not mechuyev to do it. So that doesn't have a time for it, a time frame. Psachim, carbon tamid, carbon musaf, all the other carbonas, they happen in a bama g'dola. What's a bama g'dola? So also the Gemara in Zvachim over there, but more popular for Lubavitch Chassidim. The Rambam in Hilchos Beis HaBchira brings it down, almost word for word from the Gemara over there in Zvachim. And the Rambam says a little bit of what looks like a little bit of a history lesson, that it's a mitzvah to build a Beis HaMikdash, very nice. The first Beis HaMikdash, or what we call the Mishkan, was built by Moshe Rabbeinu in the Midbar. Then he says, till they came to Eretz Yisrael. Kima shenichnas al haaretz, Eden came to Eretz Yisrael. They made the Mishkan in Gilgal. When we say the Anenus, it says Anenu Kshanisu L'Yishua B'Gilgal, right? Or Misha'ana L'Yishua B'Gilgal, Anenu, right? So 14 years it was there, and for those years it was considered a bama. The Mizbeach over there was considered a bama gedola. Talk about the difference in a minute. That was for 14 years. We know famously the 14 years. For 7 years they were conquering Eretz Yisrael. For 7 years they were dividing Eretz Yisrael. Took them a while to get it done. After that they came to Shiloi. And Shiloi, the Rambam already says, Banu Shal Mikdash. And then he says, then that there was not called a bama gedola anymore. There it was called a Mizbeach. What's the difference? The practical difference is, when there was a bama gedola, then you could build a bama ktana. When there was a mizbech, you cannot build a bama ktana. So the 369 years that there was a mishkan in Shiloi, if you woke up in the morning and you wanted to bring a carbon, you had to travel to Shiloi and bring the carbon. You couldn't do it in your backyard. After Shiloi was Charev, it was there for 369 years again. For 57 years, there was a mishkan for some of the time in Noiv, some of the time in Givain. The Mefarshim discuss exactly how many years here and how many years there. But again, then they went back to a state where it's a bama gedola, which means then you could go in your backyard and build a bama ktana, till we came to the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. Again, practical difference between a bama. So at the time that there is a bama gedola, the practical difference between a bama gedola and a bama ktana. Bama gedola, you can be makriv all these karbanos which have a time for it, a specific time. Bama ktana is only if you want to be makriv a neder or a nedava. What's the difference? So we see here there's basically three concepts. There's a bama ktana, a bama gedola, and a mizbeach, which is when there's an actual Beis Hamikdash. What's the difference between a bama gedola and a mizbeach? So the Gemara has, there's a lot of discussions about it. What exactly? There's some days that say on a Bama G'doyla you couldn't even be makriv a minchas yachid. There was no carbon minchas at all in a Bama G'doyla. But the acceptable difference between a Bama G'doyla and a Bama Kana, as I brought that in the Gemara over there in Tzvachim, is that Bama G'doyla to Mizbech, is that in a Bama G'doyla you were not makriv Karbonis and Sibur that did not have a defined time. And Hashgacha Pratis was mentioned in today's Rambam. I saw it after we learned, after I prepared the shir. It says the Rambam brings today the two Karbonis Sibur. It's actually three of them, but two Karbonis Sibur which are famous. If either Parhel and Davar, if Basin made a mistake, or a Sarah and the Zara, those are two which you're not mechuyev to do it. But if something happens, you're then mechuyev to bring it. In the times of Noiv, Givain, and Gilgal, those were not brought, and times of Shiloi, that was brought. It's interesting because according to this, also the Sar, which went with the Sar that you were makiv in Kippur, it also goes in the same gather, even though it's Kavol or Isman, it's halachically the same gather of these parsar. So it's interesting to know if there was actually the Sar Mishtalech in those other Mishkans, not Shiloi. I didn't see anybody talk about it, but I actually just thought of this as I was learning Rambam today. But we'll talk about other none. Now, what decides if it's a Bama Gedola or a Mizbeach? So there's a Tisefta, again in Zvachim over there, which says, I'm going to read the Lashon of the Tisefta because we'll discuss it a little bit at length. Tisefta in Zvachim again, and he says the Lashon like this. So he says, B'shas heter abama, oil moyed natui kedaka. There's a regular oil moyed. Ein ha'arein nasan sham, but there's no arein over there. So before we get into this, just the whole arichus that the Rambam brings down. I don't want to get into the length. The Rebbe explains that there's a chiyuv to have a Beis Hamikdash, and every single time it's according to the menucha that you didn't have at that time. Shiloi, there was a real element of menucha, so there was somewhat of a bayis shel avonim. It wasn't complete, but there was a menucha. When the Yidden were conquering Eretz Yisrael, or the days of Noiv and Givan, which there was a lot of milchamis, there was no real kavod mishkan even till Shlomo Melech came. After the Yamav, there was the real menucha. Then there was taka, the ultimate Beis Hamikdash, and like also it's brought down that menucha goes on Shiloi. Menucha and Nachla, like we know the pasuk says Kilebas and Adat al Menucha al Nachla. Nachla is the Beis Hamikdash, which is happened when Abbi B'Shloimeh and obviously Beis Mashiach. But again, back to what we're saying over here. So again, if the Aron is there is it's a mizbeach. If the Aron isn't there, then there's no. Now, according to this, we can answer a bunch of questions that come from L'chara. Bayis Sheni, there was no Aron over there. Right, there was oil, not to Kedah. There was no Aron over there. So it's kind of somewhat of a simple answer according to the Rebbe's Chiddush in the words of the Rambam of the Chiyuv of having an Aron. The Rebbe says, so again, what's the difference between? The Rebbe discusses in general the difference between Beis Hamikdash. There was a Kviyas in Yerushalayim and a Kviyas in Shiloi. That we established. But the Kviyas in Shiloi was a Kviyas because the Eibishter wanted there to be a mitzvah to have a Beis Hamikdash. So the Eibishter kind of enabled that the Yidden mitzvah Amata could be mekayim the mitzvah of a Beis Hamikdash. But the real Bechira the Eibishter wanted was in Yerushalayim, and that was the real Nachala, and therefore the Bechira that happened in Yerushalayim, we never discussed that length, was the Bechira mitzvah L'mayla, Bechira mitzvah Atzmos, which is higher than the world. So there's a difference even in the Bechira between Shiloi and Yerushalayim. But we're talking about now Bayis Sheni, why there's no Aron, what's the idea? So the Rebbe says that Aron is part of the Beis Hamikdash. It brings Medayik in the Divrei Rambam. The Aron is not a separate mitzvah. The Aron is a chelik of Binyan HaMikdash. In order to have a Beis Hamikdash, a complete Beis Hamikdash, you must have the Aron, which this makes sense now. When you have an Aron and you have a Beis Hamikdash, then you have a Mizbeach. If you have a Beis Hamikdash without an Aron, then it's a bama. It's not complete. You don't have the full mitzvah. You have menucha, not nachla. Or sorry, you don't even have menucha. You don't even have menucha. What happened to Bayis Sheni? So that was medayik in the words of the Rambam. The Rambam brings a whole arichos about building the Beis Hamikdash, where Shlomo HaMelech built it with caves underneath. And the Rebbe says that the Beis HaMikdash was built in the Oifen that the Aron L'Chatchila has two places in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Kodesh HaKodashim, and in the caves. The Melech is man by Sheni. The Aron was in the caves, so there was an oil natoi, and there was Aron. We don't not in the Kodesh HaKodashim, but it was still in a place where Shlomo was designated for it, from the Eibishter, because everything was done from the Eibishter. The Melech, there's no Havamina. There should be the idea of a Bama Gdolah. It's obviously the idea of a Mizbech. Stam, a small Indian, which was a Gevah Shir L'Atzma. Everybody knows in Tashon Chavches, I never spoke about Yidden should go out of it's not a suffix that maybe there's a shaykh to a Karm Pesach. Yidden should go out of Yerushalayim for Pesach Sheni. There was talking then because it's a sif from Rachman Shal Pesach, but that they shouldn't come into a chash that a svek of karis if you're chayv to do, because it was time when the Rebbe says was Yad Yisrael Tekifa, and there's a lot of letters between the Rebbe and Rabbi Zevin, and depending which set you bought, it's different halakim of his kodesh, but without getting into the whole Arichos Advarim, because it's really a fascinating share. I think it was actually in one of the Cholamoid shir a few years ago. I think there was someone gave a whole share on it. But just an interesting thing that Reb Pesach Tzvi Frank, who's the Rav in Yerushalayim, an interesting thing. When I was young, I used to go to Yerushalayim. My grandfather lived across the street from Har Tzvi, and I was a young boy. I thought he was taking me to Har Tzvi, so my shul. And then I grew up, and I realized that it's named after the Rav in Yerushalayim. So he writes in the Sefer Har Tzvi, he has a whole tshuva that B'chlal, no reason to have this chashash, they have to have the Karm Pesach, because he says even if we could go and build it, it's a din of a bama ktana, because he says he brings a whole bunch of rayas that if the Beis HaMikdash, if he's medayek in the lashon of the Tisefta, then you need to have the aron there. So the aron is not there according to what he says, and he says the oil moed natui, which oil moed is not natui. So he kind of says according to both of those, there's no bama gdolah. So there's no chash tzafim. Now the Rebbe never gets into this whole thing about bama. The Rebbe brings in all different reasons why maybe we should do it. But maybe Al Piyanah we could maybe kvetch a little bit and say that taka. Maybe the whole requirement is that there should be the aron there. The aron is there. But there's no. It's not a thing about bama or not bama or bama gdolah or bama ktana. The mizbech. It's supposed to svek sveka. There's no havamina to even look at the bama thing because that's totally in the aron. Yeah, you can be like aron natoi. Oil natoi. Sorry, but lav dafka. Anyway, that's just a small thing. I'm gonna wrap in 1 minute, but now the question comes that comes straightforward. Well, what was about the hakel? Were you chayav and mitzvahs hakel by a bama gdolah, or what was the deal? What was the deal over there? So if you're medayek in Hilchos Beis HaBchira, the Rambam writes mitzvah livnei bayis, and you should go up there for shalosh regalim. And according to almost everybody, mitzvahs hakel is taler in mitzvahs re'iyah. So if there's a chiv in shalosh regalim, there's a chiv in hakel. But l'chayra, that's not pashtus of what the Rambam means when he writes in the beginning of Beis HaBchira, lalis l'regel, because the Rambam over there says it's not talking about mitzvahs re'iyah. The Rambam is bringing more of milas of what the Beis HaMikdash is. The Iker, where the Rambam brings the idea of aliyah l'regel and Hilchos Chagiga, where the Rambam over there says that it's a mitzvah to go, and the Rambam again uses the lashon b'makom asher yivchar, which is lashon ha'pasuk, and the Rambam says, when are you going to go in a makom asher yivchar? So now, according to this, in the Zman Mikdash Mishkan Shiloi, so also there's a discussion amongst Mefarshim. When Elkanah, we see in the Haftarah we read on Rosh Hashanah, if Elkanah would go up with his family. So some Mefarshim explain that he was being Oil L'Regel Taka, and there was a chiyuv to be Oil L'Regel. But that's not there. That's Taka, and there's somewhat of idea of Bechira, like we said. So l'chayra, according to those Mefarshim, there would be the idea of hakel even by Mishkan Shila, because there's the idea of Riyah over there. But what about in the other things? So Stam, and we'll finish this with if you look in Tehillim, Perek Kuf Chof Beis, which we're going to say, Mirz Hashem, the Rebbe's kapitel for the year of Hakel. Or you don't listen. So it starts, Shir Maas David, Samachti Ba'omrim Beis Hashem Nelech. Sagt Rashi. I'm happy when they tell me Beis Hashem Nelech. Rashi says, Shamaiti Bnei Adam, I hear people that they say, Masa Yamus Oisei Zaken, when is this old man David HaMelech going to die? V'yimlech Shlomo B'nai V'yivne Beis HaMikdash, and then Shlomo is going to finally build the Beis HaMikdash. V'nal L'regel, and we'll go up to Ali L'regel. Right now the Mishkan is in Neuver Givain, or depends when David HaMelech said this capital. So there's no Ali L'regel, but then people are saying, when is he going to die? And David concludes, Vani Sameach, I'm happy, I'm with them on this. And then two psukim later it says, Yerushalayim Abnuya K'Yeshachubra Lo Yachtov, and the Rambam says, Sheyivne Shloima, Shalayim Abnuya K'Yeshachubra Lo Yachtov, Sheyivne Shloima B'ni Beis HaMikdash, which my son Shloima is going to build the Beis HaMikdash, so there's going to be Chubra Lo Yachtov, and Rashi adds, there's going to be Mikdash Aron U'Mizbeach. Those are the three things that Rashi says. So we see over here, again, obviously, Rashi, I don't know if Rashi's coming to say Allah, but from back over here, that the idea of Aliyah L'Regel is when we have these three things, Mikdash, Aron, and Mizbeach, which all three together create the chiyuv of an idea of Makmar Yivchar, and B'meila create a chiyuv Aliyah L'Regel and a chiyuv an Inyan of Hakel. Anyway, since then, Inyan Shukal Tzim Rachmim, Shkaya
I'm going to call upon Yitzhak Yarmush continue on the topic of Hakel.
What? It's good. Yeah.